You have likely sensed the atmosphere thicken the moment you cross a threshold. The way their composure disintegrates into restless movements, their speech becoming artificially strained, and their gaze lingering with a desperate, invasive curiosity. They are obsessively monitoring your digital footprint and interrogating mutual acquaintances, not out of a position of authority, but because they are paralyzed by the realization that they no longer hold the map to your soul. You might mistake this vigilance for a sign of their dominance, but in reality, it is the frantic pulse of the defeated. The source of their dread isn't a retaliatory strike or a public denunciation from your side. It is the absolute, crystalline silence you have adopted. For an eternity, these architects of chaos, be they blood relatives, envious peers, or former flames, clutched a metaphorical transmitter that dictated your internal weather. They had calibrated a complex dashboard of triggers designed to harvest your energy. When they activated the debt of conscience, you surrendered in apology. When they sparked the ignition of rage, you provided the erratic spectacle they used to validate their narrative of your instability. This was an airtight ecosystem where your every reaction served as a confirmation of their status as the grand orchestrators and yours as the mere instrument of their will. It nourished their vanity and anchored their delusion of superiority. But the gears of that machine have recently ground to a halt. They initiated the usual sequence for remorse, expecting the familiar surrender, but found only a tranquil, unbothered gaze. In a frantic escalation, they hammered the keys for hostility, hoping for a chaotic outburst, yet you simply remained anchored in your peace, took a deliberate breath, and exited their theater of shadows. This loss of connectivity is the ultimate nightmare for a predator of the spirit. When a puppet master finds the strings have turned to smoke, they don't seek a path of reconciliation, they fear the collapse of their perceived reality. Without the ability to provoke you, they lose the ability to siphon your vitality. The undeniable truth is that you have ascended beyond the confining script they penned for you. In their internal cinema, they cast themselves as the misunderstood martyrs or the stabilizing heroes, while assigning you the role of the antagonist, the broken one, or the liability. You inhabited that fiction with a tragic precision for years, dutifully reciting the lines they expected. However, a profound lucidity has set in. You woke up in the middle of a scene, scrutinized the dialogue, and recognized it for the hollow fabrication it is. You have grasped the fact that you are not a secondary character in their low-budget psychodrama. You are the sovereign director of your own existence. You have walked off their stage, leaving them to recite their venomous monologues to an empty auditorium where their masks of virtue now appear grotesque and transparent. Without your presence to serve as the foil, their entire performance of sanity unravels into visible manipulation. This is the catalyst for their current disintegration. It is why they are mobilizing their messengers and spies, desperate to provoke even a flicker of the old frequency. They are broadcasting into a void, receiving nothing but the static of a soul that has migrated to a dimension they cannot perceive. You are not practicing a petty game of avoidance. You are conducting a masterclass in energetic sovereignty. You have recognized that your attention is a sacred currency, and you have permanently withdrawn your investment from their illusions. The panic reflected in their eyes is the dawning awareness that their leverage has evaporated. They know instinctively that the game has reached its conclusion. They see that you now perceive the shivering, hollow entity that hides behind their social facade. Your stillness has become a mirror that reflects a truth they are too terrified to confront. We are dismantling the mechanics of this liberation today, examining how you deactivated the snare and why the forces of the universe are now rebalancing the scales. But first, the shift must be honored. The old transmission is dead. If you have permanently resigned from your role in someone else's nightmare and are done responding to buttons that no longer exist, signify this transition. Let it be known that the connection is severed. This was not merely interpersonal friction. It was a calculated assault on your destiny. A specific presence, perhaps linked by ancestry but never by spirit, spent a lifetime attempting to dim your radiance because your light acted as a spotlight on their own shadows. They weaponized perception, portraying themselves as the pillar of the community while painting you as the black sheep, to ensure you remained isolated from the resources and legacies that are your birthright. They didn't use a hammer, they used a scalpel of whispers to poison the minds of those in power. They feigned concern to lawyers and elders, suggesting you were too emotional or unstable to manage the family estate or the tangible assets of the bloodline. They built a fortress of lies based on your natural reactions to their systematic abuse. But the irony of their theft is that they are now haunted by the very walls they stole. They are living in an inheritance that vibrates with your absence, while you have become the inconvenient truth they cannot silence. You were never the problem. You were the one asking the strategic questions about the missing funds and the altered documents. You were the one whose intuition detected the fraud long before the evidence surfaced. They tried to bury your reputation to save their house of cards, but they forgot that you are a seed. And the harvest of justice is now breaking through the surface of their deception. Observation reveals a thick, electric tension that saturates the air the moment you enter a space. Notice the way their superficial confidence dissolves into frantic, repetitive gestures, their articulation becoming strained and high-pitched, while their eyes track you with a predatory yet terrified fixation. They are obsessively mining your digital history and cross-examining mutual associates, not from a throne of power, but because they have realized they are wandering blind through a landscape you now control. This hypervigilance is frequently misread as a display of strength, yet it is actually the desperate, shallow breathing of an empire in its final hour. The origin of this trembling is not a physical confrontation or a loud accusation on your part. It is the absolute, impenetrable fortress of your non-engagement. For an age, these architects of deception, whether bound to you by DNA, shared social circles, or past intimacy, commanded a psychological console that regulated your inner peace. They operated a complex array of emotional tripwires intended to harvest your psychic energy. When they triggered the obligation protocol, you surrendered your stance. When they ignited the reactionary fuse, you provided the erratic outburst they needed to maintain the public myth of your instability. This was a closed-loop system where your predictable responses served as the fuel for their self-appointed status as the masters of your universe. It fed their bottomless vanity and anchored their collective fantasy of dominance over your spirit. But the internal machinery of that system has definitively ceased. They initiated the standard sequences for guilt, expecting the usual harvest of your self-doubt, yet they encountered only a profound, undisturbed clarity. In a state of increasing hysteria, they hammered the controls for conflict, hoping to drag you back into the mud of their drama, yet you remained immovably centered in your silence, adjusted your focus, and simply vanished from their psychological radar. This total loss of transmission is the ultimate catastrophe for a mind built on control. When an influencer of shadows discovers their commands are falling into a void, they don't look inward for growth. They fear the total annihilation of their ego. Without the capacity to provoke your spirit, they are starved of the very vitality that sustains their facade. The fundamental reality is that you have migrated to a frequency that exists entirely outside the suffocating borders of their narrative. In their internal mythology, they cast themselves as the benevolent guides or the long-suffering victims, while designating you as the antagonist, the broken variable, or the danger to be managed. You performed within that restrictive fiction with exhausting loyalty for years, echoing the dialogue they demanded of you. However, a massive surge of clarity has permanently altered your perception. You stood up in the middle of a scripted nightmare, read the lines for what they were, and realized the entire play was a hollow projection of their own insecurities. You have embraced the fact that you are not a supporting actor in their low-budget existential drama. You are the supreme architect of your own cosmic journey. You have exited the stage, leaving them to perform their toxic scripts to an empty room where their masks of morality are now peeling away to reveal the raw manipulation beneath. Without your presence to serve as the mirror for their lies, their entire performance of sanity collapses into a visible, shivering wreckage of deceit. This is the engine of their current psychological decay. It explains why they are deploying their messengers and observers, desperate to find even a trace of the old reactive version of you. They are screaming into a canyon and hearing only the echo of their own desperation. You are not playing a game of avoidance. You are executing a strategic withdrawal of your divine light from an unholy contract. You have understood that your focus is a high-value asset, and you have permanently liquidated your holdings in their manufactured crises. The terror in their eyes is the realization that their currency is now worthless in your world. They understand on a cellular level that the era of their reign has ended. They see that you can now look through the social costume and see the small, shivering entity that has been pulling the levers of your life. Your stillness has become an uncompromising mirror that reveals a darkness they are completely unequipped to navigate on their own. We are investigating the structural collapse of this old reality today, mapping out how you disabled the psychological minds and why the scales of universal justice are now tilting in your favor. But before the full restoration begins, the severance must be absolute. The old signal is permanently offline. If you have finalized your resignation from the role of the sacrificial lamb and are finished answering calls from a phone that no longer rings, mark this moment as your day of independence. Let it be known that the door is locked from the inside. This was never just a minor disagreement, it was a total war waged against your future. A specific entity, perhaps sharing your lineage but never your frequency, spent decades trying to suppress your expansion because your growth highlighted their own stagnation. They weaponized the opinions of others, painting themselves as the guardian of the family while labeling you as the unstable one to ensure you were locked out of the resources and the ancestral abundance that belong exclusively to you. They did not use an axe. They used the slow poison of character assassination to influence the decision-makers in your life. They performed acts of false concern for the benefit of institutional powers, suggesting you were too fragile or unpredictable to inherit the mantle of leadership or the physical assets of your people. They constructed a prison of perceptions based on the way you screamed when they were secretly burning you. But the cosmic irony of their theft is that they are now trapped inside the very cage they built for you. They are occupying a space that refuses to recognize them, while you have become the undeniable evidence of their failure. You were never the liability. You were the only one with the courage to audit the lies and challenge the missing chapters of the story. You were the one whose spirit sounded the alarm long before the physical evidence of their betrayal came to light. They tried to bury your voice to save their dying world, but they forgot that your spirit is an ancient oak. And the canopy of your justice is now rising to overshadow the ruins of their greed. They are strategically leveraging your capacity for compassion, gambling on the hope that your innate desire for harmony and a supportive tribe will override your survival instincts. Recognize this maneuver for what it is: a calculated attempt to drag your consciousness back into the dense, chaotic atmosphere of their own unhealed shadows. Their hostility becomes ineffective the moment you ascend into the high-frequency vibration of your divine calling. They cannot strike a target that has moved into the realm of impenetrable inner stillness. Consequently, their only recourse is to entice you back to their level, inviting you to sit at the table of toxic familiarity and re-engage in the circular, draining rhetoric of the past. They require you to lower your energetic shield so they can re-establish the parasitic tethers that once sustained them. If you yield to this siren song and unlock the gate, the machinery of their dysfunction will reset. It begins with a harmless social invitation, followed by a minor imposition on your time, escalating into a barbed insinuation until you find yourself submerged once again in the same psychological swamp you spent years draining. Resistance is your only sanctuary. True reconciliation is an expensive process requiring total restitution and radical transparency. If they have not stood in the light of their own transgressions, attempted to repair the damage they inflicted, or publicly restored the reputation they sought to tarnish, their transformation is merely a new costume for an old ghost. Your biological alarm system will signal this intrusion with a physical tightness in your solar plexus. This is your intuitive firewall alerting you to a breach. Trust this visceral warning. You can grant them a distant forgiveness that releases your own spirit, but that absolution does not mandate their readmission into your private life. You are the high priest of your own temple, and you do not allow a desecrator back into the Holy of Holies simply because they have mastered the vocabulary of humility. Remain unshakable. Your refusal to participate in their drama acts as a devastating mirror that forces them to confront their own emptiness, a reflection they will do anything to avoid. You have finally arrived at the coordinate they feared you would discover. The era of energetic embezzlement has concluded, and the cycle of massive restoration has been activated. The assets of your life, be they material wealth, authentic intimacy, or mental equilibrium, are gravitating back to your center. This shift isn't the result of a combative struggle. It is the natural consequence of you aligning with the absolute truth of your divinity. You are manifesting a state of complete energetic immunity. Their projections and rituals of ill will are now harmlessly dissipating against the invisible aegis of your grace. You have reached a spiritual altitude where their primitive weaponry lacks the range to touch you. Their attempts at harm are like a summer rain hitting a marble monument, leaving it clean rather than broken. The mechanics of the universe are now performing a radical reversal of polarity. Every negative intention directed toward you is being chemically altered into a catalyst for your expansion. Every whispered smear campaign is paradoxically resulting in your elevation in spheres where the deceptive cannot tread. You are coming into your true inheritance. For some, this will manifest as tangible legal vindication or the sudden acquisition of physical property. Yet, for every one of you, it signifies the reclamation of your sovereign voice and the restoration of a confidence that can never be shaken again. The estate you are reclaiming is not composed of brick and mortar. The estate is the totality of your being. You are the sacred ground, the sanctuary, and the ultimate reward. The deceptive squatter has been formally evicted. The fabrication that you were the unstable or unworthy element has been vaporized by the undeniable proof of your success. Your thriving existence is the living evidence that indicts their lies. We must now formalize this transition within the records of the collective consciousness. We must broadcast the signal that the vacancy is filled and the legitimate sovereign has returned to the throne. This must be spoken into the atmosphere to cement this reality. If you are prepared to embody your authentic self, declare your autonomy. The deception is extinct. I repossess my identity. I am the rightful successor. Do not merely process the words, inhabit the sensation of the shackles dissolving from your ankles. Communicate to the shadows and the stars alike. The deception is extinct. I repossess my identity. I am the rightful successor. This is the command that informs the universal algorithm of your return. However, maintaining this new territory requires a cohort that understands the necessity of the perimeter. You need a tribe of individuals who have also looked at ancestral chains and declared, the transmission ends here. You are among the survivors the system failed to overwrite, the ones who shattered the vow of silence to reclaim the power of the word. Before we finalize this timeline, we must acknowledge the recovery protocol that every controller initiates when their source of supply vanishes. They do not depart quietly. They launch a three-tiered counteroffensive designed to re-establish the emotional link, sabotage your standing with others, or simply drain your resolve through attrition. Anticipate the aftershocks. The first is the vapor of uncertainty, a strange period of atmospheric friction where your plans may stall and communications may falter, tempting you to doubt your resolve. This is not misfortune. It is the old system trying to trick you into seeking their certainty. The second is the synthetic charm offensive, where they suddenly adopt a posture of profound empathy and spiritual growth. Do not mistake a change in tempo for a change in heart. If a predator is asking to inspect your locks, it is for the purpose of a later entry. The third is the trial of the public forum, where they recruit a chorus of uninformed voices to chant the narrative of your perceived coldness. Allow them to perform. In the court of high truth, the innocent do not need to campaign, only the guilty require a constant audience. Establish the three indestructible locks. First, the cessation of justification. You no longer owe an explanation for your boundaries to those who intend to use your words as ammunition. Second, the abolition of emotional barter. Do not trade your current peace for a curated memory of a past that never truly existed. Third, the sanctuary of transparency. Refuse all invitations to resolve matters in the shadows. Deception thrives in the fog, but truth flourishes in the light of the record. Understand that this reclamation is an internal liberation. It is the moment your central nervous system exits the state of high alert. It is the restoration of your ability to sleep without a mental script and to live without the shadow of a phone call. That is your true legacy. A mind that is exclusively your own and a heart that can no longer be occupied by the uninvited. As you stabilize in this frequency, you will become fundamentally uninteresting to the parasitic. Your discipline and your joy will become a high-voltage fence that protects your harvest. Your silence is not a lack of sound, it is the ultimate expression of your authority. You have become a ghost in their machinery, an unreadable frequency that defies their desperate attempts at synchronization. Your daily rhythms have solidified into a rhythmic shield, and your unwavering consistency has erected a fortification they lack the elevation to scale. The previous regime sustained itself through your internal turbulence, harvesting your midnight anxieties, your frantic search for resolution, and your reflexive need to provide clarity to the willfully deaf. That psychological hemorrhage was the invitation they exploited. Yet, you are currently architecting a fortress of focus where their chaotic interference finds no purchase. Your disciplined silence and your strategic withdrawal are the very catalysts for their dawning horror. Their anxiety stems not from your volume, but from your total absence from their chessboard. Consider this definitive proof of your transition. Notice how their appreciation for you only manifested once you withdrew your energy. Observe how their sudden benevolence is merely a reaction to your emotional distance. They only petition for an armistice when you cease to provide the fuel for their conflict. Your stillness is not a vacuum, it is a profound declaration of sovereignty. Authority creates a vacuum of panic in anyone whose status depended on your submission. The cosmic ledgers are indeed being balanced, but the preservation of your restoration depends entirely on your stewardship of this new boundary. Some gifts return through the quiet hum of synchronicity, others through the public unmasking of deception, or through opportunities appearing in dimensions beyond their influence. However, the acquisition of this abundance is tethered to a singular mandate. You must refuse to inhabit the ruins of your old story. You cannot reclaim your throne only to allow the saboteur back into the inner circle as a casual guest. You cannot accept your crown and then surrender it to the very entities that ridiculed your journey. You cannot finalize your recovery only to reinfect yourself with the same toxicity out of a misplaced sense of nostalgia. This is your definitive threshold. You must finalize this contract with a surgeon's precision, moving beyond the turbulence of mere sentiment. Your declarations are the binding signatures on a new spiritual covenant. As you record your intent, you are not performing for their benefit. You are instructing the universe to finalize the data migration. You are signaling your biological system to disarm and informing your destiny that the path is clear. Once a deception is buried, there is no dialogue with the remains. You entomb the past, consecrate the ground, and construct your future upon that foundation. Take a moment to center yourself, feeling the physical reality of this transition. When you are prepared, you formalize the documentation. Join the collective of those who have successfully recoded their reality. Together, we secure the perimeter of this new legacy. Furthermore, the soul equivalent you were led to believe was lost is currently shattering the illusions that held them captive. The interference that clouded their vision has dissipated, and they are navigating toward your updated frequency. Do you possess the discernment to recognize the unique signatures of their return? It is vital to study the specific indicators that signify a soul connection is crossing the threshold back into your life. The synchronization is intensifying. The era of isolation is dissolving into an era of profound alignment. Remain immovable in your truth,